right, so the next movie review is Sahara from 1943, starring Humphrey Bogart. And so now, let me get into my thoughts on this film, but before I do that, let me break down the description from Criticlist. In Libya, an American tank commander, along with a handful of Allied soldiers, tries to defend an isolated well with a limited supply of water from a German Corps battalion during the Western Desert Campaign of World War II. All right, so that's the plot of the movie. Let me get into my thoughts on this. I gave the plot a 3 out of 5. I thought it was interesting. I thought the characters from the different armies added interesting dialogue, interesting dilemmas, especially the Italian and German guy that they had prisoner. I thought that was pretty interesting. And also moving along in the desert, trying to find water, trying to get out of the heat. But if I'm honest, once we get to the well, I was pretty bored. We spend a lot of time there. They're just sitting and talking, which can be interesting. I just felt it wasn't super strong dialogue. And then the climatic battle where they're fighting at the end against the Germans and whatnot, it was fun, but it got over really quickly, and I was a little dissatisfied with it, if I'm honest. I do like how they were really in a desert. They were in a Californian desert, but nonetheless, it looked real because they really were out in the summer heat, or in the desert heat, rather. So I was pretty impressed with that. But, anyways, that's why I gave the plot a 3 out of 5. All right, let's move on to the acting. So, the acting, I gave it a 3.5 out of 5. I thought it was pretty good. I love Humphrey Bogart. I think he's the best part of it. Everybody else was just pretty good to okay acting wise. Bogart definitely is the best overall, and you could tell like in the poster that he was the big draw of the movie. They even say, "You've seen him in Casablanca, and I'll see him here," kind of thing. They were definitely banking off of his success from that. Um, yeah, everybody else is just kind of meh, but it was pretty cool seeing Jeff Bridges' dad, Lloyd Bridges, in a movie. He's pictured there in the middle. He's a minor character, but still pretty cool seeing him. But anyways, acting, 3.5 out of 5. All right, set design. Set design, I give it a 4 out of 5. I thought the sets looked really great. Like I was mentioning earlier, they were set in a Californian as well as Arizona desert, so it felt really real, like we were in the Sahara. So they had some really cool explosions and shots and whatnot. It looked really cool, and that's why I gave it a 4, because it's very impressive stuff. All right, cinematography, 3 out of 5. You know, the camera work itself was pretty generic. There's some fun ones, like shots like this one here with the tank driving over them, but I don't know, not driving over them. They're hiding under it, but I thought it was pretty generic looking. Nothing super crazy. So that's why I gave it a 3 out of 5. Alright, the music. So, again, a 3. It's pretty generic war music. Nothing spectacular, nothing crazy. Very generic. 3 out of 5. Alright, so that brings my overall score to 3.3 out of 5, which is a 66% on Criticalist. So now let me break down my Criticalist score. Graphic language, none. Violence, some blood and characters are killed. Nudity, sexual content, none. Political bias, so in general, World War II movies like this were made as propaganda to get men involved in wanting to sign up for the war. It's not necessarily a right or a left-wing issue per se. It's more so supporting the war, which at the time was a little bit more left-leaning because the president was FDR, right? But he could just as easily be the other way. So there's that. And then family friendly, I think so. You know, it's not too violent. I think it's a pretty tame movie that I think is fine for kids. Yeah, nothing crazy about it. No gore or anything like that. It's very, very tame. Entertainment value wise, somewhat. There's some pretty boring parts though, like I was mentioning. Once they're actually at the well, the film really slows down and for a long time. I don't know. They weren't super entertaining scenes. All right, so overall, would I recommend this movie? Not really. I think there's some better ones for sure. You know, Casablanca, for example, right, which they capitalized the success of on the poster. this movie is definitely a B movie and not on that level. But it's still entertaining and fun. But there are much better World War II movies. This is just a generic one. So yeah, with that, that concludes today's movie review on Sahara from 1943.